welcome back. Hopefully you watched the first part of this interview. If you didn't, I've got the fascinating Jerry Marzinsky with me, who is a licensed psychotherapist with over 35 years of experience and has seen a lot of stuff in his years, as we know from the first part. And Jerry's website is, I've written it down, www.keyholejourney.com. And we were just finished the last part on a story you were telling us, and we were just getting to the juicy parts of what you were saying to these voices that might get on their nerves, let's say. Just wondered if you could share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it started off, like you said, in the state hospital with stuff like the 23rd Psalm and prayers. That they didn't like that at all. Then when I got into the prison, I had more freedom to, at the state hospital, they didn't want you upsetting these guys, and asking questions about their voices upset the voices. So some of them did get upset.
Did you ever, sorry to interject there, but did you get from the patient that they wanted you to delve deeper when it was the patient speaking, or did the voices just automatically come in? And was there a let's say a want to know more from the patients as well?
Oh yeah, they were as curious. Most of them were as curious as I was about what the voices were. They didn't know. They fell into 3 different categories. And that doesn't have to do with upsetting them, but there were 3 categories. One were the ones who knew that the voices weren't who they were, that these were entities that most of them called demons. Then there was a second group that just didn't know, and they weren't sure what they were. They didn't know whether they were them or it was their thoughts or they were something else. They were kind of on the fence. And the worst of the 3 groups were the ones that believed psychiatry, that they were hallucinating, that these things were not real, that they were hallucinations, that their minds were broken, that they were mentally ill, they were psychotic, and they had to take drugs for the rest of their lives.
Would that be most of the patients that fell under that category, or was it just? I mean, I know it's hard to put.
No, I'd say maybe a third, maybe a little more. But psychiatry would tell them this is the only treatment. This is all there is. You have to take these toxic drugs for the rest of your life, and you have to come and pay us for a appointment every month or so to get a prescription. Now in Mexico, I mean, you see a psychiatrist once and he prescribes a drug and then you can go get it over the counter. You don't have to go see him again. Here in the US, they're milking you dry. Oh, we're going to give you this prescription. You come back in a month and we'll see how it works. And if it doesn't work good, we'll switch you to some other drug. In the meantime, you're paying $100, $150 for the appointment. Then you got to go to the drugstore and pay, I think it's almost $800 a month for a month of these toxic drugs. And you can get them over the counter in Mexico for $35, the same drug made by the same company. And here they are, they got the American people convinced that this is the way it is, that you have to pay this. And most of those guys go off those drugs because they can't stand the side effects. The side effects are horrible, they're horrendous.
And I think I wrote this down earlier, that it's not just one drug that people are being described with, are they? They're being, being told they need several different on the market, is that right?
Oh yeah, and it's it's all kinds of drugs. It's almost like they're trying to drug the entire population. And those drugs cause brain damage. They have horrible side effects. Now they're drugging children at a horrendous rate. It's like, let me see, more than 7.2 million kids are on psychiatric drugs right now. 7.2 million kids are on heavy psychiatric drugs. 622,723 are under the age of 5.
Wow.
80,235 on ADHD drugs, 38,534 on antidepressants, 85,143 on antipsychotics, 389,558 on anti-anxiety drugs, and these are friggin' kids. You know,
Unbelievable.
I mean, they're trying to convince the population that they just can't cope on their own without their toxic drugs. I mean,
have you noticed, Jerry? I don't know if it's the same in the US, but in the UK right now, there is a massive, it's almost like a non-stop 24/7 mental health day. Everyone's got mental health problems. You know, it's being like, it's in the papers, it's in the news all the time. And I just wonder whether it's just, you know, they just want everyone on these drugs.
Oh yeah, you look at the TV. I mean, you know, half of the 2/3 of the commercials are drug commercials by these, you know, these drug companies who are making a fortune, and 6 months later you see them being sued, you know, for the toxic effects of their drugs. And there's research coming out now that these antipsychotic drugs are making patients worse. They're increasing the suicide rate of these patients. They're not allowing them to even try to cope on their own. They're, oh yeah, you can't deal with life on your own. You got to take these drugs. I mean, you know, you feel bad. Yeah, we got something for it. And they make up these stupid names, and these antipsychotic drugs they have nowadays aren't significantly better than the old ones, the Thorazine that they were using years ago. They have less side effects, but they're not significantly more effective.
Yeah. And also, I think the reason they're doing this is a lot of these drugs, it makes people docile. I mean, you've spoken earlier about how they push these drugs and it kind of quells these voices, but it also makes people docile. And I think what they're looking for at the moment is the population to stand down.
Oh yeah.
Roll in all these different agendas, and obviously, you know, we know that there's this new world order and all that stuff. And if everyone's drugged up, they're not. They're certainly not going to show any resistance to what's going on. So I think you've got that plays into this as well.
Well, that's exactly right. And you know, here's a statement made by a psychiatrist, General J.R. Reeves, a psychiatrist. He stood before the annual meeting of the National Council for Mental Health to outline psychiatry's ambitions for the future. Now, this was on June 18, 1940, so starting all the way back then. He says, we must aim to make psychiatry permeate every educational activity in our national life, public life, politics, and industry, all of them to be within our sphere of influence. We made a useful attack on a number of professions. The two easiest are the teaching profession and the church. The most difficult are law and medicine.
Very
telling. So look what these guys are up to here. I mean,
and so far back as well, you know, they know what they're doing years in advance, don't they?
Yeah, and you look at this diagnostic classification manual they have, you know, all these mental disorders. And it started off with like, you know, 50 or so. And now it's up to, what, almost 300? And these are all made up. You know, every single one of those was made up.
And you talk to people and you say, yeah, but we're living longer. You're not. You're sicker longer.
They make up these mental illnesses, and then the drug companies come up behind them and create some kind of chemical to treat it. 2/3 of the people on this board that makes up these diagnostic categories, these mental disorders, are tied with the pharmaceutical industry. They, you know, that frickin' frack, you know, that whole DSM, that whole dictionary of psychiatric disorders is a work of fiction. It's all made up. There's no clinical tests for any of that. There's no blood tests. There's no blood work. There's no EKG, EEG. There's nothing. They have nothing. You know, in medical science, you have lab work and you have these symptoms, and those symptoms are verified, and you can verify them with labs and blood work and other tests. There's nothing to verify any of this junk that they made up. Nothing. It's all a work of fiction. You know, in 1952, there was 106 psychiatric disorders in the DSM-3. In 1980, there were 256. You know, currently there are 297. All of them fabricated. You know, it appears like they want to drug the entire population. You know, they're labeling almost every human emotion a mental illness. You know, if you're sad or angry, or it's this disorder or that disorder. A kid who talks back in school is what do you call it? Oppositional defiant.
Yeah. No, maybe that kid just was like you and thought this authority is a load of nonsense.
Yeah, I would have been diagnosed that for sure. I have no doubt they would have diagnosed me that. You know, somebody who spends
prime. You would have been primed for all 297.
Oh, geez, yeah, they would have got me with all kinds of stuff. You know, some of the experiences I've had, I know for sure they would have labeled me, what is it, schizoaffective for sure.
I'm getting more interference in here. It's almost like something through something then.
Yeah, boy, they're getting you good. They leave me alone pretty much today.
Oh, yeah, I know. This is quite normal because of the work that I do as well. But, yeah.
There's things you can do about it. You know,
yeah,
time.
I'm not scared of it. I actually find it really interesting. You know, I don't know whether I'm just warped, but I've always been interested in the paranormal and stuff. And I don't feel, you know, I think they're more scared of us than we are of them. And I think we're living in times where things are being uncovered, the veils are lifted. Yeah. And I think interviews like this are much more, I think they're much more scared of what we're doing rather than.
Oh yeah, the very last thing they want people to know is that they are energetic parasites. You know, every time I was about to tell a patient, give them that information, as soon as they were aware of that, they went nuts. That was the one thing they did not want people to know, that they were actually feeding off of their emotional energy.
Well, so that's their whole game, isn't it? Their whole game.
That's their whole game. We're basically cattle for them.
Yeah, they want us to think that we're more powerful. They're more powerful than us. When I describe to clients, they're just, you know, like mosquitoes. You just, you know, flick them off. I mean, some are obviously a bit more intense than that. But
oh yeah, it's not that easy for most people. But they don't want to be discovered at all. They want you to think that the negative thoughts flowing into your head belong to you, that they're yours, you know, and not theirs. That there is, you know, you look at it. You can pull back and you can watch your thoughts. You can watch them materialize in your head. You got a voice talking to you in your head all the time. Who's listening? Who's the one who's listening to that voice?
Yeah.
You know, that's you. That constant talk in there is your history, and that's them injecting negative, fearful thoughts of all kinds in there, and everybody gets hit by them. It's not the schizophrenics are the ones, they're the far end of the thing, but everybody's getting hit by them all the time. Oh, yeah. Virtually every negative thought that enters your head about yourself or somebody else is put there by them to get a negative emotional reaction. And then if you act on it, then that intensifies, so like pouring gasoline on the fire, and they feed off of that negative emotional energy that results. That's their food.
Yeah.
They can get you in a war or in a fight. I mean, a war, the prison is a friggin' hog's trough for them. Right. They feed on those guys constantly. That place is constantly in uproar and fear and paranoia, and it's a pit of negativity. And then they put these psychotic guys in the prison because they've closed down all the state hospitals in the U.S. They're brutalized. They're go to gangs. They get into fights. They don't give them proper medical care. They skimp on the antipsychotic drugs, and after 10 years or so with that, they're crazier than they were to start with, and then they release them on the street because they've done their time, and they wreak havoc on society. I mean, it's like I've seen some that they released. I knew they were going to kill somebody, and within 6 months they were going to kill somebody. Yeah. But they've done their time.
Yeah.
That's another crazy thing. You know, somebody escapes from prison and it hits the newspaper and everybody be afraid, lock your doors. There's a murderer out there and he's walking around your neighborhood. They're releasing 25 or 30 murderers a day from the prison into society and nobody says a word. They give them $50 and say, be on your way. When you run out of antipsychotic drugs, go to the nearest emergency room and get some more. You know, so the emergency rooms are flooded with crazy people. You know, they're trying to get these things, and most of them don't want to take them anyway. And then when they do get referred to a mental health center, it's just a big revolving door. You know, they get the meds, they go on them for a while, they stabilize them, they milk them, their insurance company or them for all they can get, and then they turn them loose when the insurance runs out. They take the drugs for a few months, and after a while they can't stand them. They go off them, they go crazy again, and then they're brought back in. It's just a big revolving door that they're not. All they're doing is suppressing the symptoms, and nothing is being treated. Nothing is being cured. They don't want a cure. Yeah. You know, look what they did with they cut down the number of kids because they were spending hardly any money on schizophrenics, hardly any, and so they got hit for that. So here's an article from, I think this came from the Wall Street Journal. And it says, the wonders are the ways of Washington. They said in a single day, the federal government officially reduced the number of people with schizophrenia in the United States from 2.8 million to 750,000. With a change of the National Institute of Mental Health website in 2017, 2 million people with schizophrenia disappeared. This is their way of handling it.
Wow.
2.8 million estimate, or 1.1% of the adult population has been the official standard for the U.S. since the 1980s, when the last major prevalence survey was carried out. The figure was provided to Congress in 1933 and used for national estimates such as the cost of schizophrenia. The National Mental Health Institute Director Joshua Gordon wrote in the Psychiatric Times that 1.1% figure is no longer scientifically defensible. In view of the most recent findings comes a 2001-3 National Comorbidity Survey, which included only those who lived at home and acknowledged symptoms of schizophrenia. It excluded those in hospitals, nursing homes, group homes, jails, prisons, homeless shelters, and most of them are in prison now. Homeless shelters and on the streets. Nor did it include the people with schizophrenia among the 29% who refused to participate in the survey. In short, 750,000 estimate, or 0.3% of the adult population, was an absurd undercount, obvious to anyone with knowledge on the subject. Why would the Federal Health Agency want to make 2 million patients disappear? Welcome to Washington. So what it is, the National Mental Health Institute spent $254 million on schizophrenia research with 2.8 million people affected. That was only $90.71 per patient. The expenditure for Alzheimer's was 162.98 per patient, 929 million for 5.7 million people with Parkinsonian's disease. So here they're spending all this money on all these other diseases. And already they're not spending anything on schizophrenia research because they're barking up the wrong tree. You know, they're going, whoa,
they know what it really is.
No, they don't know what it is. They think it's a chemical imbalance still, and that's what they're still putting. They have no idea what it is or how to treat it really. And they're not open to it. I read that letter from that professor in wherever it was over in England. I mean, you know, so they can't conceive of a disease that does not have a physical cause or a physical cure. It's outside of their box. You know, shamans have been curing this stuff for thousands of years. You look at the Bible. I mean, there's like 25 incidents where Jesus cast out these demons out of people and they returned to normal. You know? So here's a Christian society that's ignoring what the Bible is telling them. Just turning their back on it, and science is going, well, we're science, we're psychiatrists, we went to all this medical school, we know what's going on. They don't know crap. They don't know crap. All they know is how to drug people and make them sick, and there's research coming out saying that their drugs increase the suicide rate of these patients. And they're telling everybody they need to be on them if they're hearing voices. There's a lot of people that don't need to be on them. And this interferes with their recovery. It's insane. It's insane what they're doing. It's just insane.
Yeah.
But we were talking earlier about the voices getting pissed off.
Yeah.
So, every time we found something that interfered with their upsetting the patient, because their goal is to generate as much negative emotional energy as they possibly can. So what they do to people is the same thing we do to cows. They hit them, and this is everybody. Everybody has had these a thought just barge into their head, which was a horrible, nasty thought that just shocked them. The last one I remember to me, I've got a beautiful Alaskan husky here. Sometimes she gets a little rowdy, but I was in the backyard out here. We don't mow grass. We take a machete and cut the cactus off of things. So I'm out there, trimming back the cactus, and here's this voice comes into my head. This thought comes into my head. The dog was next to me, and I'm not doing anything bad. It goes, cut her head off. I'm like, what? What? I'm like, what? Yeah. And it's like I'm feeling guilty. I'm like, where did that come from? And I'd never do that. And then it's all this turmoil, like, and I'm like looking at the,
which is the energy they feed on, right? So
that's it. They got a good drink out of that one.
Yeah, exactly.
And I knew what it was, and I knew what it was, but most people don't. This thought comes in their head to punch this guy or shoot this guy or kill this person, or and it's something most people would never do.
I've had people that I work with. They said, Tony, I was driving down the road, and this voice said, "Drive into that wall." It's not my voice, and so I know exactly what you mean. It's really, if you don't know this stuff, it's
So they hit everybody with that stuff. So everybody's being hit. The difference between normal people, the so-called, and schizophrenics is the amount that they're being hit and the intensity that they're being hit, and they're not understanding at all what's happening to them. Psychiatry isn't helping at all. Yeah,
which I would speculate, as we said before, that if they've had lots of trauma in their life, that's when the heavier attachments get in. This, in my experience, when you're really out of your center and you're really super traumatized, maybe abuse, that kind of stuff, that's when the real nasties get in. That's what I found.
They can smell negative emotional energy like a shark can smell blood. So they go after those people, and all they have to do is just trigger them a little bit. So they can go into your mind, and they can pull up every negative thought you've ever experienced, you've ever had, and rub it in your face. So you look at other animals in nature, and like you watch a lion chase a deer, and the thing panics and runs, and finally it escapes the lion, looks around, the lion's no longer there, and then it just goes about its business. It's like it never happened. Not with people. They remunerate the same thing over and over and over again. You did this bad thing, and that's these things doing that.
And it's also, if you have a subconscious wound, maybe you were abandoned as a child or betrayed, they hook in on those wounds and ramp those up. So it's almost like they know our weak spots better than we know.
They know exactly the weak spots. They can pull up every. I mean, I've had patients say that they pulled up rotten things that the patient did 20 years ago that they'd long forgotten about, and they pull it up and just put it in and throw it in their face. And generate that negative emotional energy, and then the person becomes depressed. Their energy leaves, and you can actually test that. I mean, you can have somebody hold out their arms straight out and say, think of the happiest you've ever been in your life. Get a very clear picture of it, and then get your pinky and tell them not to let their arm down and push down, and that arm won't go down. Then you tell them, okay, get a very clear picture of the nastiest, ugliest, rottenest thing that has ever happened to you. And when they get it clear, do the same thing, and that arm will go, it'll go right down. So your energy disappears with those negative thoughts. And they do not want people to know that they exist. They want you to think that all your thoughts are yours.
Yeah.
But if you can pull back and you can watch your thoughts, or you can pull back and you can listen to your thoughts, they're not you.
Yeah.
So most people think they are their thoughts. They are not. And that's what these things want you to think, that you are your thoughts, and that they will put these thoughts in your head to do these rotten things or things that will get you in trouble, that create more emotional turmoil if you follow them.
And you can take this to other steps as well. A lady called Eve Lorgan does really great work about relationships, how they can interfere and cause arguments between, like they can just project a thought, and then all of a sudden there's an argument, and then they're getting all this food from the argument that goes on.
Exactly. They don't like families, and they especially don't like little children. Right. Matter of fact, I just got an email from Mark Gray saying that a woman in France threw her 2 little kids out the window of an apartment window, and everybody was horrified over that. In the U.S., these shootings, and they never ask where those thoughts come from. But before any behavior takes place, there has to be a substrate, there has to be a structure, there has to be a thought first. People don't just go off and do things without a thought, providing that structure first. And it's never asked, where does that thought come from? Where does that thought come from? And they can't conceive that it would come from somewhere outside themselves, but that's exactly what's happening. And there's a Christian mystic, Emanuel Swedenborg, 700 years ago, who lays all this out. He was able to, he was one of the top scientists of his day. He was the chief mining engineer for the Queen of Sweden. He discovered all kinds of things. He was a brilliant man. At the age of, I think it was 50 or 55, he stopped all his scientific endeavors and switched over to investigating spiritual matters and how the mind worked. He was given complete access to heaven and hell. And he wrote a book, one of his most famous ones was called Heaven and Hell. And he would interview angels and demons, and those demons matched exactly what you see with these voices that the schizophrenics are hearing. It's the exact same thing. They're saying word for word.
Yeah, I think humanity's going to have a rude awakening, because it's going to at some point have to come to the realization that we're actually sharing this reality with a parasitic influence, and that's going to be a big stretch for a lot of people.
Well, you have to take control of your thoughts. I mean, if you don't, they will. So they love people that are just drifting through life, and their minds aren't occupied in some productive endeavor. I mean, they will go run in there and they will take over that unoccupied space, and then they'll start feeding you.
Also, what I found is that they will encourage bad behaviors as well. So I work with people, and it's like, you remove these things, and sometimes someone who's been drinking for all their life, or they've had smoking habits, or whatever it might be, they're able to give up those things. It's almost like you remove that little voice that's saying, have that beer, have that cigarette, have that. You remove that, it enables the person, the spirit of the person to make better decisions. So that's also interesting. But I just wanted to ask you, sorry, you were going to say something?
Well, you look at people who live with alcoholics, and they'll all tell you when that guy's drunk, he's not the same guy. It's a totally different person who acts very different and is usually pretty mean. And then you look at these guys who go into blackouts. I mean, I've talked to patients who they drove to another city and didn't even remember doing it. There's one guy who came into the ER, and he had blood all over his bumper. He didn't know what he hit. He didn't know whether he hit a person or not. The most interesting case I ever had of alcoholism, there was an Apache. Apaches, I don't know if you know about Apaches. They're Indians in the out west that were fierce warriors.
Yeah,
but
this and then they named the helicopters after them.
They named the helicopter after them. So there was one that was so violent up on the reservation up north that they sent him down to the prison. And he was coming to my unit, and I watched him. I mean, he didn't go to Alhambra, he didn't go to classification, he didn't go through the normal steps. He just barged right through and appeared in my prison unit. And I heard he was kind of a, kind of evil shaman kind of guy. And, I was interested. I wanted to talk to him and find out what all that was about, because I would never get to see another one of these guys like that. So I pulled him in to my office and told him, well, I'm going to be your psych. I'll be checking on you once a month. I'll be calling you in. And boy, he looked at me like I'd rather, cut your guts out than say another word to you. So, I could just feel the hatred coming off of this guy. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, I'll see you next month. And I went to the head of the Indians on the prison yard. They had each has their own little group. And I got along good with the Indians really well. I helped them out, helped them get through their fires and that kind of stuff. And I went to the head guy and I said, what's with this guy? And he said, you be very careful of him. You be very careful of him. And so I called him back, and it took me probably 6 months before I could talk to this guy for 20 minutes. And I'd leave him in there until I felt, he couldn't stand it anymore. And he started talking to me, and he would tell me about spirits chasing him, and he was able to put curses on people, which kind of got me a little, make people sick. And I said, basically, after listening to all this stuff he could do, I asked him, well, if you could do all that stuff, how come you can't stay sober? And I was like bracing myself, for him to explode. And he looked at me and he goes, because of the spirits of dead alcoholics.
Oh, right.
He said there was a bar in Phoenix where they were piled so high over that bar. He said he could see them and they disappeared up into the stratosphere. He said if he went anywhere near that bar with alcohol in them, they would come down and they would be, drink, oh yeah, drink, and they're drinking. He said his girlfriend was also an alcoholic, and she was hit in traffic in front of him walking across the road by a truck.
Right.
So he said it was the spirits of dead alcoholics who couldn't get drunk in the spiritual form they were in, but they hadn't moved on. So they're still hanging around the bars and stuff,
right,
looking to get into somebody so they can get drunk.
That's why they call them spirits, huh?
Well, that's what they call them, spirits. Matter of fact, Van Dusen, he's a clinical psychologist who worked in a state hospital in California. So I met him and worked with him probably for maybe 2-3 years before he died of cancer. And one of his, he was talking to an alcoholic schizophrenic and was asking about spirits. And the voice said, "There's the only what was it? The only spirits here are in a bottle or something like that." He was trying to make friends with the voices to learn about them. So he had some very interesting comments from them. He never went to try to get rid of them. He was just trying to be friendly. Matter of fact, he would give the patient an MMPI, and he would give the voices an MMPI independently. And he said the voices were much more crazy than the patient. So it's weird, but we still didn't get to the part where the reactions of some of these voices. So the most volatile reaction you'll get is when you go to tell the patient that these things are not who they are, that they're energetic parasites, that the voice they hear is not their own, it belongs to this entity, and that they're putting negative thoughts in their head to drain them. Now, you have to be careful about who you're going to tell that to, whether they're ready for that kind of information or not. And families.
Did you have any violence towards you when you said any of this?
Well, I had one, this was another Apache. He picked up a big chair and he threw it up the top of my head. But for the most part, no, I didn't. I was never hurt by one of these guys. And that one with the Apache who threw that chair, I pushed him too far and I knew it. So, when I was growing up, part of not trusting authority was my dad. And you know, he was a pretty violent, nasty guy. And the only way I could get back at him when I was a kid would be to push him to the brink of exploding and then back off. And so I had a lot of practice at doing that. And if you mess it up, you get creamed. You know, that came in very handy with these guys.
Yeah.
You know, to push them as far as I could. And when I felt they were about to snap, to back off. You know? So I got a whole lot more information from them that way than any other way.
Did you ever get anything like really insightful about their world, or anything about what they were doing here, or did they ever come out with anything like that?
Well, you know what? Carlos Castaneda said something about that. And here's an interesting poem written by one of those guys, but it's not what I was looking at. So here's a poem written by one, a schizophrenic. We started a support group for people who hear voices on our Facebook site. And this poem appeared there one day. It was, she says, "The darkness has come again. There is no light. The voices have taken over. I've lost myself again. Then after what seems like this will never end, a tiny light comes in. I hold on to this light until it brings me back to myself again. I will never give up. I will always hold on. No matter how dark it gets, there's always a way back."
Interesting. And what about the actual drugs? Like, how did these entities react to when they were going to be drugged? Did they try and put the patient off from taking the drugs, or?
Oh yeah, yeah. Matter of fact, you know, we were talking about the attacks on psychiatrists.
Oh yeah.
You know, so years later, patients were telling me, you know, I'd ask them, why do you quit your drugs? Why are you quitting your drugs and going insane? And you know, they blame the side effects. So what I did there was got a list of all the symptoms of paranoid schizophrenia. I mean, like 2 pages of awful symptoms. And then I'd ask them to write down all the side effects, all the nasty side effects they had from their medications. And all of them had the same side effects. So I just write down the ones you had. After they'd done that, I would give them both the sheets. I'd give them the sheet with the psychotic symptoms, and I'd have them check off every one of those nasty symptoms that they experience. You know, nightmares, paranoia, you know, anxiety, all these things that the voices are telling them. I mean, all these nasty things. And they checked off a whole bunch of them. Then I'd give them both back, and I said, which one's worse? Every single one of them said the psychosis is worse. It's like a living hell. And then you'd ask them, you know, then why do you stop taking your medicines? And they would go, this went on for years. I don't know. That's what they'd say. I don't know. It went on for years. And like a crazy guy, I would keep doing this, you know, until I'm like, something's got to break, because these people have got to know what's going on, because nobody else does. If we don't get the information from them, we're not going to get it. So it has to come from them.
Yeah.
So one day, a girl said, I didn't take it because the voices were telling me the psychiatrist was poisoned. And they were pointing to the side effects of these drugs, you know, as the result. So, well, you're being poisoned, and here's the proof. Here's the side effects. You know, some of the side effects. So here's some of the side effects of these things: muscle rigidity, slowed movements, dystonia, involuntary muscle movements and contractions, muscle tremor, restlessness, feeling like one needs to be in constant movement, tardive dyskinesia, neuroleptic malignant syndrome, that's life-threatening, fever, sweating, irregular heartbeat, blood pressure changes, altered mental status, confusion, disorientation, constipation, dry mouth, cardiac effects, sexual dysfunction, weight gain, dizziness, nausea, vomiting, headaches, insomnia, all these things. These are all side effects of these things, even these newer ones. But not all of them get these things. But even so, it's almost like going up to somebody and saying, okay, you got two bad choices here. You can either have a bad case of the flu, or you can choose the bubonic plague. Which one do you want? Most people who are sane will go, okay, I'll take the flu. Not these guys. These guys are going, no, we're going to take the plague. So I'm like, well, why are they doing this? Why are they consistently choosing to go crazy again? They know what it's already. The first time it's excusable because they take the meds and they think, okay, the meds cured this, like you take an antibiotic and whatever, the infection goes away. So they're used to a drug curing stuff.
Yeah.
As soon as they go off the drug, the voices come back, and they come back with a furor. It's almost like, hey, you messed with us. Now we're going to get you back. Stronger. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll show you.
Yeah. So this made no sense. This made no sense. And then came the one who said the voices telling me not to take the drugs because I was being poisoned by the psychiatrist. And I don't know how many times I heard that before. I'm not taking these drugs because psychiatrists poisoned me. So where did those thoughts come from? They came from the voices.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing they go after is the meds, because the meds are calming these people down. And that's the only reason they work. They don't work because of any chemical imbalance. They're major tranquilizers. They work because they calm these guys down, and the voices have to work much harder to upset them to get that negative emotional energy that they feed off of.
Yeah, it's like a vicious circle.
Yeah. So, all these things are doing is suppressing the symptoms, but they're causing physiological damage in the meantime. So the voices don't want them taking this stuff. So the first thing they go after is the meds.
Interesting. So, I've been around people that, I think have had these kind of attachments. I think, like you said before, everyone has these voices. I think people have certain attachments, some worse than others. But I know, like, when I'm around, I guess you call them like energy vampires, with the really dark ones, you can feel really drained. Did you have that? Did you feel really drained working with
Yeah. For years, and I didn't know why that was. When I first, I was like you. When I got into there, I was very curious about their world. But I'd find out that if I scheduled, more than 2 of them in a day, I would come back home drained, and I didn't know why. I just couldn't get anything done, but it was consistent. So I didn't know why that was happening, but I saw that it was happening. So I either scheduled 1 or maybe 2 during a day, but never more than 2, because my energy was being drained too. Now, Swedenborg talked about the same thing when he met some of these negative entities in his spiritual travels. He also talked about being drained by these things, and that was consistent. And all of them, you ask. Matter of fact, I have some of the measurements I did here. When I saw that they were being drained, I would ask these guys. I came up with this this real low level. Let me make sure there's no names on these things. So I asked them, how much energy you have before the voices came on a scale of 1 to 100? How much energy did you have after? Did you have while they were attacking? And so here you can see this for yourself.
Oh, right, yeah. 25%. How much energy do you have after they left? 25%. How much energy did you have while they were around? 25%. How much energy did you have before? 50%.
And here's another one. Now I did scores of these things.
You might have to hold it up a bit. After they left, 10%. When voices come in, 25%. Before, 50%. Yeah.
So they drain you. Now here's what Swedenborg said in his spiritual travels. There are a couple of statements here. Now he's talking to evil spirits on the other side in his travels. So he's in a trance. And he would go into a trance for maybe 3 days at a time. And he'd come back and he'd write about all this stuff. So he's talking about these same entities. He said, when they attach themselves to someone, they then induce mental torment from boredom, which they increase in breathing continually, and thus make one impatient, all of which creates intense pain and induces such weakness of the body that one can scarcely raise oneself from bed. This was shown to me by the fact that when they were present, this kind of weakness took hold on me, and when they were removed, it ceased in the degree that they were removed. They also employ many an art to pour in boredom, and by this, weakness. And so boredom is one of the big things they use. And if you're bored, they'll jump in there and they'll hey, yeah, you want something to do? We'll give you something to do.
Interesting. Yeah, I never thought of it like that, through boredom. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, people are floating. And then he goes, here's another one. He says, a certain murderous spirit was inwardly thinking nothing else but revenge. And in fact, so covertly that I saw nothing of what he was thinking. He raised up in every one of his own subjects. From my mind, he raised up whatever he could distort into evil and then into hatred. And so he fed himself continually. So here's Swedenborg 700 years ago talking about these things feeding off of him in the same manner that I experienced and that the schizophrenics experienced. And that's the last thing they want you to know, is that they are energetic parasites.
Parasites, and I think that's a good place to leave it, because you know, we are more powerful than these things. I think, you know, obviously the cases you're talking about, it's not always easy, but you know, watching our thoughts is key with all of this, isn't it?
Oh, it's critical. It's absolutely critical. You need to remember that every negative thought that comes into your mind is put there by them. Every negative thought, especially about yourself or others, is put there by them. And Swedenborg says none of your thoughts are, they either come in from an evil side or they come in from a positive side. That you are like a radio that tunes to the station. So if you're entertaining those negative thoughts, if you're acting on those negative thoughts, you're moving to the negative side of the dial. And then something called spiritual gravity takes over, and you'll start being pulled deeper into their frequency. Now, if you're doing the positive, the same thing happens. Until you break so far free of them, you're not being hit by them anymore. You know? So it's up to you. So man is the space between these two forces, and he's the one that chooses. And so the thoughts aren't yours, but you choose which ones you want to entertain and act upon.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. Absolutely fascinating. Jerry, I could speak to you for 2 or 3 more hours and listen to all your stories throughout the years. I'm sure you've got a whole load more that you could tell me, but we've got to end it there, unfortunately.
No, we got a book coming out pretty soon.
Okay.
This is just kind of like a trial version, but we got the final version.
And what's the book called, Jerry?
In the works. We called it An Amazing Journey into the Psychotic Mind, Breaking the Spell of the Ivory Tower. So we're hoping to have that out by the end of December. And it contains all these stories and more, and what people can do about these things, which is even more important. And what they are and how they operate.
Where can they find the information and the book? On your website?
We'll have it listed on Keyhole Journey when it comes out, the one that you mentioned. And then we'll start our own website when we get this done. But we've been pouring a lot of time into it to make sure it contains the kind of information that will teach people both what these things are, how they operate, and what they can do about them.
And is there any other way that we can support you in the work that you're doing? You have a YouTube channel, Facebook, that kind of thing?
Well, yeah, I got both Facebook and YouTube. I think I sent you the links. I haven't spent much time on the YouTube. Matter of fact, the last probably 10 interviews I haven't put on there yet. But we got to catch up with that yet. We've been working on the book so far. Sure. But all you guys listening tonight, you're supposed to be here. You were pulled in here to listen to this from whatever you were doing in life, And it's no accident that you're hearing this, because you're ready to.
Yeah.
And thank you Tony, for giving us the opportunity to get this information out.
No, you're welcome. I'll put all the links to your website and everything down below in the description so people can find you. And thanks to you, you know, it's not an easy topic. We get hit with all this energetic interference, and you know, it's a difficult thing to talk about, going against the grain. So thank you so much for what you're doing. And go on.
Right. After you get the information out, if your audience has any questions, I'd be glad to come back and answer them.
Yeah, sure. No worries. We'll do a follow-up one for sure. And
Okay.
if anyone's got any questions, leave them in the comments below. And yeah, perhaps we'll arrange a Q&A or something like that. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. And guys, thanks for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. It really helps the channel out. Subscribe to my newsletter as well, because I don't know how long we're all going to be up on YouTube with the censorship stuff. So I'll put the link into the description with that as well. And yeah, have a great day.